Hello, magical people of the internet. I am Jen, and welcome to my vlog, I Never Thought I Would, where we talk about doing things we never thought that we would do and the interesting places that they can lead us to. I have a fabulous guest today. He is a podcaster and an author, Tim Niederriter. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Jennifer. It's great to be on your show.
Yes, it's so nice to have you. We chatted about a month and a half ago on your podcast, Alive After Reading, and it's so nice to see you again and have you on.
Yeah, it's interesting being the guest instead of being the interviewer for a change.
You're not in control.
Yeah, it is. It does actually make me uncomfortable. I'm quite particular. No.
Oh, you're doing great. So you have several book series and you have quite a crazy imagination. You're writing in the kind of sci-fi fantasy realm. And I'm sure with that crazy imagination of yours, I'm sure you've done maybe one or two things you never thought you would. Do you mind sharing one of those with us today?
Definitely. And though you'll have to stop me if this sounds too weird. But the thing I never thought I would do is design my own book covers or design anybody's book covers, and now that's what I do for myself all the time. It's become pretty much normal for me. And how it happened, well, that's kind of for at first it was just okay. I'm going to become an independent author. Back in 2015, I'd better start. So I was using these services to find book cover designers and stuff, and it just mostly it was a matter of expense. I just couldn't afford most of these places. I'm just chronic. I'm one of those starving artists you've heard so much about, not physically speaking, but So I worked into it. I started by I have Photoshop for various. Yeah, I have Photoshop, and so I started working with that. But it took me 4 years to get good at it, and it took a lot of advice from other people. In fact, after my first few book covers, I was I was actually I put out a few books with my covers on them. Let me put it that way. And I got I'd been interviewing Zigzag Claiborne, who's another author of some fabulous stuff. You should probably have him on this show. He's fantastic. But he is also he's a publisher or an editor, I think. And he suggests, I forget exactly what his day job is, but he works in publishing. And he told
Mhm.
me, those book covers you have there aren't doing your books any favors,
Mm.
because I was pretty bad at it back then. Like I didn't even know how to crop out a figure from a background.
Mhm.
So I used a lot of transparencies and stuff, and it made the covers very jumbled, and they just didn't work well. So
Mhm.
at first, so he pointed me to Fiverr, which is where dreams go to suffer, at least. But so I went there, and I had a few podcast. I had a few jobs done for me there. I hired one of these designers at like 5 or 6 times, because I write fairly long series. I plan for a long series at any rate.
Mhm.
And so, after doing that a few times and paying $5 or $10 a book cover, I decided I was even that's too much, because I just don't know when I'm going to use the covers. It
Mhm.
wasn't even that was too much. It's that I liked making the covers. I was still doing that for practice,
Okay.
but
So
I
when do
never
you feel
really
like you
at
got,
no point did, huh?
sorry, I was just going to interject and ask, at what point did you feel like you were finally becoming proficient at making the,
Yeah, that's the part I
how
never thought
long?
would happen. And it took, it was probably 2018 or 2019 when
Mm-hmm.
I thought, when I stopped hiring book cover designers at all, because for a while I would hire them just for the text,
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't do book cover text to save my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I could do most of the other designs. So I'd hire that same designer just to put some fancy fantasy text on the book after I came up with a nice image. And
Okay.
after, yeah, go on. Yeah.
So was any of this cover creation like freehand drawing?
No, okay, so that's the why I never thought I could do something like this, because I'm an
Okay.
awful. I have no hand-eye coordination. My hands are very shaky. I can't draw at all. Basically, I took a life drawing course back in college. It was my only course that I didn't get a B in. Basically, I got a C in it. It was
Aw.
my art class, because I just couldn't put up with it. I mean, like I probably could have gotten a B if I just stuck it out and worked as hard as I did the first half of the term, the second half, but I just couldn't make myself do it.
Yeah, I'm
So
not,
I slipped off a little bit. Yeah.
I don't really have an aptitude for drawing either. I don't know if it's a shaky hand thing, but like my imagination just doesn't go there. Like, when I'm drawing with like my niece and nephew, their drawings, their crayon drawings look more sophisticated than mine.
I bet
They're
you.
so
I
much
bet
better at it.
I bet I'm in a similar boat as far as actual skill. But I have always had visions and stuff that I wanted to put into imagery,
Hmm.
and I always thought it was very sad. I was always very sad that I couldn't draw. I have multiple sketch pads where I was trying to learn to draw, and I just never
Hmm.
really got anywhere. And the key thing here, the biggest thing for me, when it comes to developing skills, is that I stopped using paper because I'm just awful with paper. I kind of even when I would do when I write by hand back as a kid or a teenager, I've never had proper holding technique. This is kind of this weird thing. I've had this giant writing callus on my finger ever since I was a kid because I did write a lot on
Hmm.
paper, but I always held the pencil wrong, and so one of my fingers is actually physically deformed where I hold the pencil, and it's never healed. But it's this weird like, okay, I am autistic. Let's start with that. I don't have much sense of space. That's one of my big weaknesses. A lot of autistic people vary, but I don't I can't perceive space accurately a lot of the time.
Hmm.
Uh, that's probably putting it a little more extreme than it is, but it's very difficult for me to use perspective and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I've always really had images, especially of particular settings and places from not from the real world, from my books eventually, that I wanted to do or wanted to put into stories. And I was told a long time ago, I mean many times when I was learning to write, that my visuals were also lacking. Like I had not developed what things looked like very well for the reader, that kind of thing, when I in my early work. This is before I published anything. And yeah, so I worked on that for a long time, and I think that really helped me develop the visual skills to know what should go on a book cover, as well as, I mean, I read some books on the subject and stuff as well over the years.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool that you didn't let this kind of, you know, mental block, so to speak, stop you, because for me, like, I know I have a mental block when it comes to like visual art. So I
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like, I don't need to do that. But I think it's really cool that you were, passionate about these visions that you had, and you knew like only you could make them into something. You know what I mean? It's not the thing you can convey to somebody on Fiverr and have them like
Yes.
deliver, like they can't like transmutate what's in your head. Only you can do that. So I think it's really cool that you like stuck with it and pursued it. And now you're like super proficient, and like it's in your wheelhouse now. It's like on your skill list. It's pretty impressive.
Right. I'm still learning, but I can do it at a level that is competent. I have that ability, and I never thought I would. That's the general, but that's the story of my life in a way. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I never thought I'd be good at that I'm pretty decent at now, or I'm good at now. Like I think writing fiction, which
Yeah.
I was always challenged me as well.
But also, like, isn't there an element of like, we're not good at things that we don't practice? It's so
That's
easy for
exactly
us
true.
to
Yeah.
convince ourselves that we're not good at things that we've never really done before, and like,
Right.
even with this drawing example for myself, it's like, well, I've never actually tried to take a drawing course or like sat down and read like a, connect the dots or paint by colors type of thing to try and like,
Hmm.
you know, educate myself on, okay, there's actually like kind of rules to when you're drawing, and there are certain ways to do things that, that make it easier. And, but that's anything in life, like whether it's,
That's very true. Yeah.
yeah, whether it's writing or like doing people's taxes, like the more you do it, no, it's true. The more you do it, the more proficient you are at it, and the easier it comes to you with less amount of effort.
Absolutely. I mean, there's certain things like I am a war gamer. That's one of my hobbies, just briefly. And so I like to kit bash models, cut up models, and put them back together as other models. And one of the things involved in that's a very visual process. It's similar to sculpture,
Mm-hmm.
except that it's just you're taking existing stuff that somebody else made, sculpted, and then making it into your own thing. But but the thing that I kind of stops me most of the time is painting models because I'm so afraid of painting in a way because I'm worried I'm going to destroy stuff or I'm going to, but it's really not something to worry about. One of those things, just like Photoshop, you can undo almost anything you do with a model. And that's the thing. And I only really figured that out this year. And I've been kit bashing models for 25 years.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, you
Yeah,
learn something new all the time. You know, it doesn't matter how much of an expert we think we are in a topic, there's always room to learn something else.
absolutely. And yeah, and that's one of those reasons that I mean, sure, I'm not doing. I've been Photoshop is or cover design is one of my younger skills that I'm good at
Hmm.
because I've been doing everything else pretty much since I was a kid, and it almost one of the best things about learning a skill as an adult is that I found out I could.
Yes, we can keep surprising ourselves with our ability if we let ourselves try. You
Yeah,
know? Yeah, I know so many people, once we reach a certain age, we just kind of, we feel like we're adults and we've like accumulated the skill set that we're going to have. And that's that. But it's great, you know, to never stop learning. And it doesn't matter. Just, you know, take up something you didn't think you would, whether it's
uh,
photoshopping or tango dancing or jujitsu class. Like, there's no reason, you know, everyone starts from zero.
aptitude is not as big as attitude when it comes to learning skills. It's
Exactly.
not as important because if you have a good attitude about your skill, you can get pretty good at just about anything as long as you spend enough effort at it.
Yeah. And if it's something that you have fun with, you know, if you make it
Yes,
into like, I have to become the best at this, then you're going to be too self critical the whole time you're trying to learn, that you're not going to learn to enjoy it. And that's how we get really good at things, is like doing things over and over again that we really enjoy.
and getting out of our own way. There's this great
Yes.
book, The Inner Game of Tennis. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, I have.
Okay, maybe I mean I mentioned it a lot. So it is a really it's just so true. It's such a valuable text because it's not really about tennis, at least not for a lot in large part. It's about everything, all skills.
Well,
And getting
exactly.
out of one's own way is really important. So try, and that's how you try different stuff. That's how I do it, or how I try to do it. Honestly, the stress level is putting gray in my beard too soon because I'm not that good at getting out of my own way. I often push myself way too hard,
Yeah, well, I think, you know, finding the fun
usually
in it,
counterproductively.
bringing a sense of joy to our work is half the battle, because we want people to have fun
Mm-hmm.
while they're reading our things. You know what I mean? As much as like, you know, the series can have like some scary parts or some shocking parts or some fight scenes and violent parts, ultimately, we want everyone to have fun while we do it. Which brings me to fun. Why don't you tell us about your book series?
So the main book series I've been working on this past year or so is Demon Hunter. The Demon Hunter series is high fantasy, which is whatever. It's not the perfect title for a high fantasy series. Let me put it that way. That I sometimes kick myself over that title because though the main character of the series is a demon hunter, that kind of says more urban fantasy, and I think it might just distract people. Anyway, that's my self-conscious side talking. See, I don't get out of my own way very easily. But one of the things about this series is about well, one demon hunter, this guy who's a wind mage. He can control the wind and make himself light as a feather and fly around, and he's immortal for various reasons, for reasons that I've not yet explored in the actual text that's come out. But which I think that'll be in book 4. We'll definitely know. The readers will know more about that. I already know. Unlike most of my series, this is not completely discovered as I write it because I built the setting way before. Been building this universe for 10 years, 20, 15 years maybe. And
Cool.
I started probably when I was a senior in high school, so 12 years, something like that. And it started out, it just revolved around this one kind of fantasy superhero is kind of how I think of him. Deckard Hadrian, he's immortal, but he's also he's not always in a good mood. That's kind of
Mhm.
the gist of that character. He's frequently he's an immortal demon hunter. His whole job is to hunt demons and throw them down the pits of the world so that they can't hurt people. But the story gets a lot more complex than that when you realize that he works for a demon too. Like
Okay.
everybody in this setting kind of is under somebody's thumb,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, from the normal people to the peasants, and that doesn't sound like as much fun as it actually is. Honestly, I think it's that kind of complex relationship that I really enjoy exploring in the fiction. And
Well,
I mean, there's
I
a ton of
think
other characters in the series
actually,
too. Now, but
I think it makes sense too, because it gives like a complexity to the dynamic of your storytelling, because good and evil are not as cut and dry as we want it to be. Like I was a huge fan, I'm still a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
oh
it's
yeah,
like, you know, the story device that she keeps having boyfriends who are vampires, you know.
or otherwise bad news, like the guy from season 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, somebody who has something dark and sinister going on, you know, when she's supposed to be like the hero and make all the right choices, you know. So, yeah, I think that's a really cool element to it, because then the character's so much richer of having that struggle of he's trying to fight for good, but he's under the thumb of somebody bad. And, you know, at the end of the day, he's just trying to be able to live with himself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's very much how I see the character. And there's a certain amount of him also being, because when it's one of those things my twin brother has pointed out to me many times, is that when you look at a guy who's 350 years old and in a setting with magic, the more you know, the more powerful you could be. You know, he's actually not as strong as you might expect as far as magic, because he's actually kind of a slough. He's not really working super hard a lot of the time to study more and become more powerful. And like he's got some other enemies who are kind of
Mhm.
more along those lines. More of like I'm an evil
Yeah.
overlord type immortals.
But if he's
But
willing to focus, he has the potential to be greater.
right, yes, and he might have a
Which
unique
is
set of
the
skills,
hero's
but he's
quest.
not. Sorry, what?
Which is the hero's quest, right?
Exactly. He's
You
not
know,
really on
like
a
for
quest.
him to
That's the
live
other
up to
interesting.
his
Yeah.
potential. Yeah.
Yes, he needs exactly, and I've got some other characters who aren't immortals in the story as well. Who, in each book, I kind of been introducing a new one, who have these kind of magical essences that harken back to ancient times. So they have kind of a natural magical talent, but
Mhm.
they don't know where it comes from or what it is until, well, and in fact, even Deckard, this immortal demon hunter, doesn't know exactly why these people are getting powers like they are, and that's kind of the overarching story right now. He's
Oh,
trying to
that
figure
sounds
out.
so cool. I can't wait to get my hands on one of my copies and start the series. This is totally up my alley. I love that whole like fight between good and evil and like, you know, the hero's journey, moral dilemma type of thing. Sounds fascinating.
I'm really happy with how these books turned out. I actually dictated the first two, which is kind of a rough thing for writing. It was rough for me, I've cleaned them both up now. They're both excellent. And the third book, that's still my favorite of the series so far. That one's called Whale Country, and it's the only one. It's the furthest along, the first one out. I'm writing book 4 kind of on and off because I have a lot of other things
Cool.
I'm working on too. Yeah.
And I also, for a second, wanted to get into your podcast that you have. So you have a podcast called Alive After Reading, where you talk to other authors. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Alive After Reading started because I was doing a different podcast. We don't have to go into that. And then from the Mickey Mickelson from Creative Edge approached me about starting a talk show where I talk to authors because he thought I was good on my earlier show, and I jumped at the opportunity. So that's kind of why I started it. But I've always kept doing it for the past 3 or 4 years. I guess 3 years, 4 years. Well, I don't remember. Who cares? It's been long enough. But the thing is, I just love talking to other writers and geeks and
Mhm.
people like me, people who I can have anything in common with, basically, who I can easily latch on the conversation, because I'm a talker, as you probably can guess at this point. And I just like a good conversation. That's why the show doesn't focus on anything in particular most of the time. I mean, I usually go back to the writing well of talking about that because that's where my interest lies, which is honestly kind of a problem. But not for that show. It's a problem for me in real life.
No, I don't think
That's
having
how
a
just
passion
how I
is a
am.
problem. I don't think so at all.
I guess I certainly, it's easier to talk to other writers about writing than it is to talk to people who don't write fiction
Well,
about that sort of thing.
definitely. Yeah, that's why I find it's important to have like an artistic community. You know, they're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like people that you would socialize with, but you know, people to like share pages, talk about process, you know, just kind of have like that professional touchstone to what it is we do. I definitely feel the same way as a performer, you know, because I'm an actor and a filmmaker as well, as we had discussed on your podcast. So when I feel completely removed from that world, you know, yeah, it's hard because to me, I don't really go a day without talking about an idea for a project or something that I'm working on or trying to work out a storyline, you know, or getting excited about a movie or a performance or, you know what I mean? That's just, it,
Absolutely. I try to, you know, it's funny because I don't, I find that people are probably just tired of talking. Maybe I don't have enough friends in my writer community, or I don't reach out to them enough, because I know the people in my life who aren't part of that community, they get bored with me going on about writing
well,
after a
yeah,
while.
yeah,
But that's
exactly.
why it's important. Yeah, that's like what you said. It's important to have the creative community and kind of a team that
Yeah, and
supports each
I
other.
think the problem, you know, with kind of family, loved ones, people we share space with, they kind of have this feeling like, you know, can't you leave your work on your
Yes,
computer?
and
And
that
it's
is
like,
tough.
no,
It's tough.
you don't
Yeah.
understand. This is the work we do. There's no such thing as going to the office and leaving at, you know, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
7 o'clock and putting it away. You know, while we're eating dinner, it's, you know, bubbling inside of us. While we go to the gym or go for a walk, ideas are bubbling inside of us. When we go to bed, ideas are bubbling inside of us. When we wake up in the morning, we have a notebook by the bed with a pen in case something happens in our sleep that we need to write down for one of our
Yep.
stories. Like, you know, so I can understand how it does get a little draining for people around us who don't have that same enthusiasm for the process, you know.
And it's not on them. It's definitely not on them. That's
Not at
just,
all.
you know, some people,
No, they just
some
don't get
people.
it.
I mean, I know people like even like my twin brother who I mentioned before. I talked to him about writing a lot, but he's like, why can't he almost said that exactly to me. Why can't you just talk about normal things and not talk about your work? Like he never wanted to talk about his job, you know.
Well, that's
And
the thing because they consider it jobs, and for us, we
yeah,
consider it our creations. Like, you know,
yeah, definitely.
um,
I There's more to it because it's not an alienated activity. It's something I'm invested in instead.
mhm. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for stopping by virtually and chatting with me today. Why don't you tell everybody your links of where they can find you, the podcast, and your book series?
So the best place to find the podcast is mentalcellarpublications.com, because that is mostly just the podcast feed right now. There's other information on there, but it's out of date and needs work. Then the website where you can spell my name, the best place to find any news about me or new stuff about me anyway, is to use the links on timniederriter.com, which is need, you know, spell timneedawriter.com. Because that's easier to spell. And then all my books are on Amazon. You can also find the print books on pretty much any print on demand website. Yeah,
Excellent.
thank you.
Well, thank you again for coming to chat with me today, Tim. And thank you all out there in the interweb for tuning in. I would like to challenge you to do something you never thought you would do. You never know where it's going to lead you. And let us know what it is in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and have a beautiful day.